exciting.
Well, thank you very much for this wonderful turnout today. We're sorry we were a little bit delayed because of a flight out of Washington, D.C., but isn't it great to have Newt Gingrich back in Columbia? I'll be very brief. It's my pleasure to introduce the United States Congressman of the 6th District, Bill Johnson, our Congressman. As I indicated in the invitation, this is going to be one of the most hotly contested races, maybe in the country, certainly in Ohio. The Democrats are going to do all they can to put Nancy Pelosi back in charge of this district. We don't want that to happen. I want to have Bill Johnson step up to the plate. Give a big round of applause for Bill Johnson.
Well, I can't tell you how much I appreciate you being here today. I am so honored and humbled that Speaker Gingrich came to the Spread Eagle Tavern for me. Now, he's been here before, and if you walk through this facility, you'll find his pictures plastered up all over the place. I told Dave, I said, you really know you're somebody when you get your picture posted at the Spread Eagle Tavern. Mine is in there. But it's because I'm in the background shot of somebody else. We're working on it. The speaker and I actually have a connection that I don't even think that he's all that familiar with. I met the speaker in 1983 when I was a student at Georgia Tech. One of my professors in graduate school invited him to speak to our organization and management graduate class at Georgia Tech. That was my first engagement with the speaker. We have some other things in common as well. He represented the 6th District of the state of Georgia. I represent, of course, the 6th District of the state of Ohio. We have another thing in common. He moved to Marietta, Georgia, to better represent his constituents. I moved to Marietta, Ohio, so that I could be in the center of this big, long, snaky river district, so that I could better represent my constituents there. Hey, we know that this is going to be a tremendously important election cycle. The president cannot run on his track record of pro-economic growth because he doesn't have one. His policies have hurt America. They continue to make our economy worse. And because of that, he's going to run on tactics of envy and division. He's going to try to make it about everything else other than what's important to the American people, which is jobs, how we're going to get the wheels of our economy started back, and how we're going to get this health care law off the backs of the American people and off the backs of business. But you guys have heard that all from me before. You didn't come here to hear me. I am so proud to introduce who I believe doesn't really need an introduction. Everybody in America knows that this gentleman knows what makes America tick, because he's had the heartbeat of America. He's had his finger on that pulse for many, many years. He knows what it takes to make America strong. And I'm going to tell you right now, you're going to hear more from Newt Gingrich in the future. I am so pleased to introduce to you the Speaker of the House, Newt Gingrich.
Well, it's great to be back in Columbiana County. I've been here off and on, I guess, for over 30 years now, and I've been to the Spread Eagle Tavern a lot. In fact, right after I became Speaker, we had a luncheon here with some of you remember Congressman Ralph Regula and others, and talked about how we were going to move forward and get to a balanced budget and reform welfare. I remember, we'll always remember being here at Spread Eagle. So Dave, thank you once again for having us here. And Bill, we're very proud of the leadership you're providing in Congress and the job you're doing. Although I would point out to all of you, when somebody who was a sitting congressman describes how he met me when I was already a congressman and he was a student at Georgia Tech. It's not quite as bad though. I turned 69 on Sunday. And I was in one of our offices about a year ago, and I saw this young man who was a new intern. And I said, "Don't I know you?" And he said, "No." He said, "We've never met." He said, "But my father was a page for you when you were speaking." I thought, okay, that was a sign of how far we've come down the road. This district really matters this year. And it really matters because Ohio really matters. It matters that you re-elect your congressman who is providing real leadership on energy, which I'm going to talk about in a minute. But it matters also because you have a chance to help elect a U.S. Senator who represents the values of Ohio instead of the values of Hollywood. And you have a chance to represent, to elect. You have a chance to help elect Governor Romney to replace the current disaster in Washington. Now, this was driven home to me yesterday. I've been going through, since I stepped down as a candidate, I've gone back to being just a citizen activist, and so I've gone through 5 briefings now at the Congressional Campaign Committee, and we were literally yesterday going through Ohio. And the turnout in this district and the size of our majority in this district may well be the margin for the whole state. So a margin for U.S. Congress, a margin for U.S. Senate, and a margin for President, all right here. So I am doubly glad to be here. I want to talk first about Congressman Johnson and the key role of energy, and then I want to talk about the presidential campaign for a minute or two. And I look forward to a chance to shake hands and make sure I get to see all of you. I'm so grateful you're out here today. First of all, on energy. Washington does not realize it yet, but once again, innovation is changing things. It's particularly appropriate to be here in Hanoverton, because Hanoverton's first great claim to fame was a canal. And the canal was the cutting-edge technology from about 1800 to about 1840. And so the canal was a big deal. And then the railroad came along. And the first Republican president was somebody who understood the importance of innovation. Abraham Lincoln, in his first campaign, when he was 23 years old, in 1832, had as part of his platform building a railroad. Now the reason that was amazing is the railroad was invented in 1829 in England. The first railroad engine arrived in the U.S. in 1831. It was imported as advanced technology. Lincoln had never seen a railroad, but he intuitively understood that if you had the wide prairie of Illinois, a train would be better than a stagecoach. And a large part of his career was built around railroads. He was a railroad lawyer. He won a very key case. A steamboat had hit a railroad bridge. And the steamboat company sued the railroad company for creating an obstruction on the river. This was a really important case because if the steamboat won, all the bridges would have to, in effect, be movable, and you'd have to keep them open all the time. And Lincoln won the case, proving that, in fact, the steamboat captain was drunk. And I did not say he was a Democrat. I will not dispute that assertion, but I want you to know it was somebody here in the crowd that made that statement. But Lincoln went on in 1859 to stand at Council Bluffs, Iowa, looking across the Missouri, and pledge a transcontinental railroad at a time when we didn't have the steel capacity to build the rails, and we didn't build engines big enough to cross the Sierra Nevada. I just cite that as background because one of the things we have to be dedicated to as Republicans and conservatives is to reestablish a passion for innovation in the American spirit and the American tradition. And what's beginning to happen in western Pennsylvania and eastern Ohio is a perfect example. And Washington is totally behind the curve, and Congressman Johnson is playing a major role in helping educate Washington. Let me explain this to you. For the last 40 years, since the first great oil shock in the 1970s, we have been trapped by the intellectual left in a model called peak oil, which they teach in the universities, they believe in, they write articles about, and peak oil means there's a limited amount of fuel, it's all going to run out, we had better find a replacement, and even if the replacement is 10 times more expensive, we're going to need it because we're running out of fuel. Now what happened was, over the last 20 years, two things came together. And innovation often is several things suddenly coming together, not any one thing. And the two things that came together was something that had been developed at sea, which is the ability to put one hole in the ground and then go out horizontally for a long distance. So you suddenly could begin to reach out off of one, if you have a huge sea-going derrick, for obvious reasons, you'd like to have as few of them as possible. They're very expensive. And so they began to learn how to do what's called horizontal drilling. The second thing was something which has been gradually evolving now since the 1970s, which is a process called fracking, which is using liquids to open up and draw together both the gas and oil at very deep areas. What had happened geologically, we sort of vaguely knew there was stuff down there, but we couldn't figure out commercially how to get it. All of a sudden, the ability to drive a hole horizontally, combined with the ability to open up the shale so that you begin to get a lot more seepage into a central reservoir, suddenly you could get this stuff out of the ground. Now let me give you an example of the two great examples. North Dakota today, they have jumped from 150 million barrels of oil estimate